Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true firsthand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One of the most powerful yet understated aspects that plant medicines and psychedelics alike bring to the table and open up for each person who connects with them is the ability for them to connect them deeper with the world around them, specifically the planet of Earth as a whole. What I have found in my own journey is that it is one thing to quote-unquote know we are all one and the Earth is a conscious being, yet it is a very different thing to quote-unquote realize we are all one and that the Earth is a conscious being. With more individuals reporting feeling a lack of connection than ever before in the world, coupled by the effects of this lack of connection, including poisoned soils, oceans full of plastic, etc., it is more important than ever that we as a society get to remember this notion and do so fast if we are to leave an Earth that future generations can inhabit and live full lives on. Today's guest on the show is someone who has been able to grow his connection to the Earth by creating his business, Be Here Farms, and in doing so, not only discover his passion for working with the land, but also be able to create one-of-a-kind products that are able to capture the pure essence of the nature he creates them with. In today's episode, we will be diving into his journey with plant medicines and psychedelics, and illuminating the cognitive shifts and overall transformation these medicines opened up for him in his experience of life, and the role these medicines played in him discovering what he truly loved and finding the strength to follow his heart, even in the face of massive challenges. This episode is one that I am absolutely stoked to bestow on each of you, as the approach he takes to life is one that I feel each of us can learn and gain inspiration from to ensure we are leaving the Garden of Earth greener than when we found it. So prepare yourselves to dive back down the rabbit hole as I welcome my man, Jared Pickard, onto the show. Jared, my man, what's up?
Hey, dude.
How you doing, bro?
Great. Thanks for the intro.
Absolutely. As always, man. You know, it's interesting, man. We met, what was it, about a year ago, I would say. I mean, maybe not even. It feels like a year ago.
It must be longer. Come on.
Yeah, it's got to be longer.
No?
I know I met your brother a little bit before you, and he told me so much about you. And of course, when we hit it off, I was like, oh, dude, this guy's my guy. Like, we love so many of the same things, including psychedelics, but also, you know, regenerative agriculture and so many things that a lot of people don't necessarily love. They might be aware of it, but they don't love it. And, you know, one of the things that I love doing in the beginning, you know, I know a little bit about your story, but of course, people listening, they don't. And so I'd love for you to give us a little bit of your background and also like how you became aware of psychedelics, right? We don't need to go super deep into it. I have some further questions I'll ask you, but like how you even became aware of them, right? Because I imagine you grew up in a similar time I did with the DARE program, Just Say No, all of that stuff. So how does someone who, especially with the background I know you have, how do they become interested in psychedelics? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. I grew up in most of my life in New Jersey, Randolph, New Jersey, town in northern New Jersey, and a lot of interactions with like New York City. Ultimately, after college at Oberlin College, I lived in New York City and Manhattan and Brooklyn for a time. And I was working on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange at that time. So I had sort of, you know, personal transformations that occurred, realizing, first of all, what did I realize? I'll get into in a second, but the realization came through mindfulness practice and an introduction basically to the Paul Chek for doctor model. And so that was the first real interaction that kind of shook up my thinking. Even if you just go down that rabbit hole, there's probably introduction to psychedelics at some point. But at that time, I thought it was like I was seeing a personal trainer. And then I learned kind of the difference between a personal trainer and a holistic life coach. And so holistic life coach starts introducing me into different ways of thinking about my diet, my sleep, my passions and dreams and goals, mindfulness, rest, recovery, and just a more holistic perspective, which is right in the name, right? Yes. So through the introduction of these things, you know, through new types of movement and getting more physically fit, and through new types of eating, which was, you know, physical and mental clarity, and to achieve that stuff, I had to change some of my behavior, like going out late, drinking, doing, harsh recreational drugs and stuff like that. And so all of that starts compounding and turning into a positive feedback loop where I'm really liking how it's feeling. Mindfulness practice, as well as like the fact that I started writing a lot at that time. It happened to be through a blog that I started called I'm High on Cooking, but like it could have been my journal. It could have been anything, because like I was just focusing a lot of attention on the topic and learning about mindfulness practice. And so all of that like allowed me for the first time probably ever in my life to recognize what I did and didn't like with more clarity. And so once I did that, I pursued an opportunity through some things going on with my father, who had just retired and was looking to develop a large piece of land at the time out in Idaho, with some of my budding passions to conceive a commercialized way of achieving his own personal goals. Meaning that I thought, oh, well, we could find a piece of land, we could develop it. We could actually have what we would have called an agriturismo, but we could have like a small hotel on it. We could have a farm. We could have all the things that you want. We can make it available to the public as a way to keep it vital and thriving and paying for itself. So it's not just a vacation home. And it could also be a vacation home, which is more or less what he was seeking. That led to me leaving New York and pursuing that project, first with a series of apprenticeships, some agricultural / like entrepreneurial apprenticeships for a farmer restaurateur in Georgia, and then some hospitality apprenticing with also my wife, Velisa, who's my partner on this project, where we apprenticed at Blackberry Farm in Tennessee, which is named like a farm, has a farm, but it's also a super high-end hotel. So from that point on, 2012 till 2021, we have been developing this project out in Northern California, where there's a lot of difficulties in developing a project like this, just from permitting and being allowed to do it in the specific location that you want, and then actually developing it, especially in our case where we're up in the mountains, where building is just more challenging, regardless of the building project. And so that was, many years of learning curve and kind of shooting from the hip, trying to develop an extremely complicated project, which did always manage to find its way forward, even though it's extremely difficult. Always, every success was hard fought. This all sort of climaxed or anticlimaxed, but it turns out to like not really have been either one, just another step along the way. But there was a major event at the end of September 2020, which was a wildfire that impacted the whole region, including all of our neighbors' wineries and homes and everything that burnt down. And then on our property, due to almost a decade at that point of working with the land and rehabilitating the forest and in various ways for just everyday benefit, but also in preparedness for an event like this, the fire actually moved through our property, all 300 acres of it. The whole place got burned. Several of our structures got burned, but the home and the farm were extremely well protected, and the fire pretty miraculously didn't burn them down, even though it burned everything else down around it. That project, in terms of a hotel development, pretty much ceased at that moment, even though it took me a few days to realize it mentally. And so the last year and a half, we've been living as a bit of a traveling band, and we've now landed in Austin. We have plans of selling that property. Thankfully, there are folks interested that we're speaking with, and that's just great news. But it's also been really difficult because we poured our entire selves into that place. Our daughter was born there, right on the farm at home. And it was the kind of thing where we quote unquote knew for sure we'd be living there for the next 70 years to the day we died. And we're developing this hotel project. So the centerpiece of that project was going to be, besides the land itself, which was the most powerful aspect of it, and just the raw nature, was going to be this biodynamic farm that we developed. And you can't just, turn one on after you build the hotel. So we started developing that right away. It turned into really quite, the wonderland, which I don't feel like like a braggart to speak really highly about, because I actually kind of executive produced it. Certainly was my vision and ethos, and oftentimes even specific desires and intentions, and it really was just a dream that boom came out, and there it was in real life. And yet the execution on the ground, we had a farm director, and sometimes many farm hands, at sometimes as little as one, working with him. And so the results of their work was just phenomenal. And it is still, we're still maintaining it and stewarding it for the next, for the purchaser's sake at this point, and just because it's it's a living being, and we're just, taking care of its needs. We have a deep, relationship with it. And so when you have a farm that's just bustling with abundance, that's more or less sized for a small hotel to be there, and yet the hotel's not going to open for several years, at a minimum, if not selling a lot of produce and stuff, you start coming up with creative things to do with it. And so, and you never have like a house worth of cabbage, you get a farm's worth of cabbage. So all of a sudden now you're making like sauerkraut because there's 30 heads of, cabbage or whatever it is, any kind of pickle or dried herb or thing. And so our house, our life is just overflowing with projects like that. And has been since the day we found the farm, found ourselves living on a farm, I should say. And the result of that turned into products that you were mentioning, like things that we really enjoyed so much that, especially with the intention of having a hotel being on site, we intended to share with our guests through the food and beverage program, spa program, in-room amenities, and then, gifts and souvenirs and stuff like that. And so to develop that, we started offering them at the farmers market, as well as through a private membership club we started, all of which, led right up to the fires. And from there, when we put the hotel concept to bed, we really put all of our energy into the products at this point, because we've developed this incredible collection of self-care offerings, which currently we're sourcing still from the farm. Meanwhile, knowing that there's going to be a transition between when that property sells and when we really develop a homestead or a garden here where we're growing all the botanicals in-house again, we're increasing our networking with various biodynamic farms and wild foragers and other places that are just doing exceptional work. And it's difficult because we talked about on Highly Optimized, 0.002% of U.S. farmland is certified biodynamic. So it is difficult. But I mean, that's one of the things we're most passionate about. And so it's not so difficult, because if you're enjoying it, you just get to do a lot of it.
Yes.
And so I'm doing a lot of networking and emailing and reaching out, and the biodynamic community is small and friendly. So it's been going really well. And all that experience that we had, the reason why I say like climax, anti-climax, is because it's not like my dream was to develop the world's best hotel, which at a time, that was certainly our marching orders. But the dream was to, live in connection with nature and to make my livelihood off of something that I felt passionate about. In fact, so passionate about the very things that I found to be transformative for myself, because I went through a huge life change where I feel better off on the other side of it. So it's like maybe other people will find similar, positive benefit from nature connection, movement, self-care, and all the various things that you and I just enjoy and are passionate about. And so that was kind of like the hotel was just a vehicle for, achieving that dream. And so when the hotel concept went away, the dream didn't go anywhere. And that's why we were able to just pour ourselves into the products, realize that instead of people coming to the property and experiencing the products can go to them. In fact, they can go to more of them. Like the hotel was going to be expensive to stay at, a couple $1,000 a night, $5-10 you could have dropped to come for a weekend. In Napa, it's very, all the other hotels were the same price, and we were looking to meet and exceed their standards. So it was going to be high price, and therefore very few people ultimately. It's only going to be 9 rooms as well. So all this to be said, now our products can theoretically reach thousands, or many more people. And I feel the same way now. So I was developing this project pretty much in a vacuum. Like I was on top of a mountain, and we didn't have partners. It was family invested only, my father. And it was my wife and myself and my daughter, who's now 6.5, and, has been contributing since before she was born, frankly.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's like, since moving to Austin, which has only been since January, I've met 50 times more people who are like excited to meet and interact and collaborate and resonate with than in my entire decade of living on top of that mountain. Several of those relationships have been about people who are in fact developing their own land-based projects where they're looking to, whether it's host retreats or just for their private family or maybe even hospitality like hotels and whatnot. These things are on other people's minds. They're happening. And when I hear them talk, I think, oh my God, I've been doing that for the last 10 years. I have backlogs of solutions for you. Like let's rock and roll. Yeah. And so the idea that my experience can be transferred to off of my project and onto potentially many people's projects, which would impact that much more, islands of land and, communities of people. And that was the dream, right? So all of a sudden, through this devastating wildfire, somehow the dream potentially is finding its way in a much better and, arguably more grand way than would have been in the way that I thought was best.
Hey everybody, I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. What's up, ladies and gents? I wanted to take a second while I had your ear to share with all of you a very important announcement. Anyone who has been listening to the show for some time now knows that I am passionate about coaching and helping other coaches up-level their coaching practice. What I have noticed in working with hundreds of coaches is that coaches of all different types are facing challenges with being able to get their clients strong, consistent results, understand where to put their energy to allow their practices to thrive, stand out in the vastity of coaches, move from imposter syndrome into trusting themselves, and ultimately make the money necessary to be financially independent in their coaching practice. The root of these issues comes down to a lack of connection with your creative force as a coach and entrepreneur. This is why we at Highly Optimized have created the Connect With Cannabis 10-week coaching certification program. The reason that cannabis is the focus of our program is because cannabis acts as imagination medicine. And in order to break free of these challenges, you must first be able to imagine yourself as the coach that is successful and has been able to break free of these challenges. When you are able to truly imagine and connect with the most powerful version of yourself, you can find the clarity to build your business, your authentic voice to speak directly to your clients, and the faith that you can overcome everything standing in your way. Once you have experienced and learned how to achieve these results for yourself, you will be able to offer this same unique skill set in your coaching practice to support your clients in overcoming their limiting beliefs and allow them to experience the breakthrough results that will make you stand out as the world-class coach you are. In this program, you will learn the science behind cannabis, how to experience the healing powers of cannabis, and how to facilitate these healing powers with your clients. With personalized one-on-one support on how to apply these frameworks into your business and weekly group calls within a community of coaches just like you will be equipped with a unique skill set that will allow you to get consistent, powerful results with your clients, feel confident in your coaching abilities, and allow you to gain financial independence while having the opportunity to wake up each day excited to share your important work with the world. For anyone listening who is hearing the call to set yourself apart and develop a unique set of coaching skills not found anywhere else in the world, jump over to the link in our Instagram bio and book a complimentary call with me today. Together, we will go over your current challenges in your business, your goals for your business, and decide together whether you qualify for a seat in the program. The next class begins April 20th, and spots are filling up quickly to be a part of the budding movement that is cannabis coaching. So book your call today and position yourself as a leading voice of how to work with this sacred plant medicine in your practice. Thank you all for your continued support and enjoy the show. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because it brings up a couple of things for me. Number one is that surrender, right? Like I learned that from psychedelics, right? Because you can't, if you're not good at surrendering in your life and then you go into a psychedelic experience, you're going to learn real quick how to surrender. And that whole experience with you of having the fire, having all of these really traumatic things happen, yet at the same time going, okay, this or something better has landed you somewhere where now you're able to actually make more of an impact, even though if you had asked yourself 4 years ago, let's say before the fire, 2 years ago, whenever it happened, like, hey, would I like to live in Austin instead of living up here? You would have been like, fuck no, right? But it's funny how surrendering has led you exactly where you need to be. And the other part of this too is that, I had a similar download one time on a psychedelic experience where I had this notion where I was like, everyone talks about helping the little guy, right? And it sounds great in nature, right? Like, oh, I want to, gain money so I can help the little guy, right? And there's nothing against that. And at the same time, there are so many big people with trillions of dollars, right, that just don't have the right priorities. And so my whole thing was, well, instead of helping the little person, what if we could get ourselves into the networks of these big people and give them something like a psychedelic experience, a breathwork experience, literally anything that all of a sudden shifts them and they go, whoa, I need to put this money into helping the earth. And if we can change a couple of those people, think about how many of the little guys we can affect on a downstream effect. So it's very similar to you were talking about with the farm. It's like, now I'm able to connect with more people. Now I'm actually getting better results than when I was in the perfect environment for what I wanted to do. So it's very interesting how all that plays out.
Yeah, I relate to that. I mean, there was a felt experience of it where immediately after we decided that we wouldn't be moving forward with the hotel on site, which was the only way I could even say it at the time. I would say moving forward with the hotel on site.
Yeah.
I was like, because of course, like we're still doing it somehow.
Yeah.
Right? And so once I accepted once I knew that was happening, I was shocked to feel relief. So I was working single-mindedly, tens of thousands of hours on one thing for a decade. We decided not to do it, and I felt relief. I thought I would have felt like endless depression, but I felt relief. I eventually did kind of catch up and find my way through some depression, but the overwhelming sensation was of relief, pivoting, going with the flow, finding what's present. What did we create during this time that's still relevant and valuable and that is, can we move forward on? And then sort of even realizing that it's more than that. It's like, what did the fire burn off and clear away, for our benefit? And then obviously the answer is, I don't know. And then so it's like, okay, allow whatever that is, and let's assume that it's even bigger and better. And that's why this is happening. Allow it to present itself, And so then I kind of was doing nothing, almost nothing, allowing. And then through that, I found some depression and impatience. And then I leaned into that through some guidance from my brother. I was just I have this brain fog. I just so unmotivated. I should be really just grabbing the bull, by the horns. And he was like, well, just don't be so hard on that aspect. Maybe you should lean into the cloudiness. What's going on with that? And one day of leaning into the cloudiness and my energy levels just started skyrocketing. Just, I sat down and, relaxed for a little while, read a book, didn't pressure myself to figure out the company's next steps, and went for a walk, and that was it. So yeah, relief I think was interesting. I also think it's an interesting barometer that that we're going in a good direction. I think my body would have felt super cranked up, and if my innermost being knew that it was a terrible decision to stop the hotel, I think it wouldn't have felt that good if I'm in touch with my feelings. Being in touch with my feelings, I was shocked to observe relief just wash over me when we made the decisions. It's crazy.
I just attended Paul's sound healing workshop this past weekend, and a lot that I knew, right? I knew I could restate as facts, actually was realized in me. And that's how I separate knowing from realizing. Is knowing is just like, yeah, I can read it from a textbook, memorize it on a flashcard, and say it to you. Realizing it is actually applying it to your own life and integrating it in a way that it actually becomes real for you. And one of the things that, it was obviously a shamanic sound healing workshop. So we were doing a lot with sound, but I never realized how simple it is to do what you just said, right? Which is like, of course, I've learned in numerous different programs. I mean, I teach it to my clients, right? Lean into the feeling, yada, yada. But when I was at a workshop where I didn't have anything else to do, right? There was no distractions. Like I was away. I was obviously not in Massachusetts. I had no way of doing anything that I normally do. And I'd also paid to be there. So I was very invested in paying attention. He was able to bring us through some exercises where literally at the end of the day, I felt the only way to describe it is emotionally douched. Like I just felt like, wow, I'm brand new again. And all of a sudden, all the downloads were there. All the connection was there. All the love was there. I knew exactly who I was. Like every chakra was cleansed out. And I think that does happen. There's so many, especially we were talking about biohacking beforehand. There's so many biohackers and, people that do incredible stuff with technology, yet nothing really beats the body's own innate wisdom of how to cleanse itself. And if you just give it space to do that, it will do that. Yet it is one of the hardest things to do for a high achiever is be able to do that. And personally, this is one of the main reasons and one of the main areas that cannabis has been one of my main teachers in, because cannabis, I really feel is going to change the world. And the reason why is because you can still operate a normal human life while interacting with it. So if like you, your father, your husband, you can still do all of your duties like mushrooms, ayahuasca, all of these things. They're incredible, but you have to take time aside to do that. Right. And for a lot of people, that's like a no, right? They're busy. They got to do stuff. But cannabis can help be that little threshold switch where we can switch into, a feeling of more love, of more connectedness, et cetera. And that's like the one thing that I've realized is that in the times I sit with cannabis, it's much easier to be with my feelings and allow my body to do what it's going to do because I'm more in touch with the subtleties. So because I'm more in touch with the subtleties, it actually becomes more fun because I can notice more things. And I think that as children, most of us can feel these types of things, yet they atrophy because we don't actually, we're told like, no, like feelings, they're really not real. You don't see imaginary friends. You can't hear voices. All of these, clair senses, as Paul talks about, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, intuition, they atrophy. And so as we start interacting with plant medicine, at least for me, a lot of these minor senses started coming back online. And I'm curious for you, because I know we both enjoy some high quality cannabis. What is cannabis specifically? Why is it so attractive to you? Like, what do you find in it that you enjoy?
I also, it'll be easy to remember that question because you also made, and I'll answer it, but you also made me think about like, you were just saying how you need to set a time aside for these other things. And I'm sure it's been talked about at length on this show by other people, but it's like, there does seem to be a sub-perceptual microdosing, extreme benefit to perhaps all the substances, but like 100%. Certainly psilocybin. And so in terms of just like the health benefits of, like, I feel like my relationship with cannabis is pro-health, as I would borrow from Paul. I think maybe this is where I came from. But I put a lot of intention around achieving that. Like I have a whole sort of collection of, preferences and rules about what goes into the volcano and how I clean the chamber and how I'll only do it once and why I made that decision after used to blowing the chambers twice and finding like a real tightness in my chest eventually, because I do use it quite a lot. And so I don't know, there does seem to be a real sort of just a real health benefit and almost no time at all set aside required to taking a well-sourced microdose of these different substances. So, which is kind of interesting because I don't know if that has, like, I haven't researched whether or not that has a historical context or if that's something that like modern people have realized thanks to our ability to measure these things.
Like if ancient humans
we're always nibbling on just a little bit because it felt right and was good in some way, but didn't, wasn't the ritual ceremony where we had a shamanic dose. I don't know. Has anyone ever talked about that on the show? If there's precedent to microdosing, or if we
Yeah.
just invented it now?
Honestly, I don't know. And, I would imagine, and this is just, again, imagination, I would imagine they didn't, because from my understanding, from what I've learned from Chek and, all the research I've done, like, they looked at these things as almost like a blow the lid off the top, like initiation, really, like, especially from boys to men, right? Not the band, but, the actual, like, going from a boy to a man. That was one of the main initiations they used, was plant medicines, combined with some really messed up stuff when you really think about it, like having them run through thorn patches and crazy stuff over fire. Pretty insane stuff that I would not want to be under the influence to do, but yet they've been doing it for thousands of years. So yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I don't know if they were microdosing back then. I mean, who knows? Like, they weren't necessarily microdosing it, but Terrence McKenna's whole story about how when they were down in like La Caraca, or however you pronounce it, basically they were starving every day. They didn't have any foods. They were mushrooms growing, and they were like, screw it, let's eat them. So I'm curious to hear, like, if they were actually doing more of a macrodose, but on more frequency, simply because they were looking for food as well. That's an interesting thing to bring up that hasn't been brought up on the show yet.
All right. Well, we'll have to circle back to that.
Yeah.
And also, you were just really teetering towards, initiation ritual. That's sort of like, where I find it interesting present day. And that kind of brings us back to, how did I even get into psychedelics? So I'll answer the cannabis question, and then I'll try to tie it back. And then, like, that's got to be, how much more can we talk about? But the cannabis thing, and hallucinogenics in general were both introduced to me recreationally. So, I just, around 17 probably, and I was like, people were already drinking at this point in my social circles. And I was not. I was sort of a late bloomer, like freshman year, sophomore year, like 14, 16. I was not really into it. Sometime around 17, I got into all of it pretty hot and heavy, and stayed that way until the story picked up around those the farming apprenticeships and stuff that I mentioned. And so basically, it's funny because I could tell you what cannabis does for me nowadays, but something inside me had this incredible attraction to it then too, because recreationally, I enjoyed it, like, excessively, I would say. It was definitely a part of my, like, identity, just in terms of, even all throughout college. I recall having like 30 glass pieces of smoking apparatus to choose from. Some of them artistic,
Yeah. What is up, everybody? I hope you are all enjoying the show, and I wanted to stop by real quick and share a little bit about our latest podcast sponsor, Freedom Builderz. Now, Freedom Builderz are a team of graphic designers, website creators, videographers, social media marketing experts, and coaches that build out your custom online business from A to Z. This is a done-for-you service, which means they do the work for you, while you get to put your focus back on what you love most, which is coaching your clients and bringing in sales. Now, as a former online fitness coach, Mike knows where your struggle points are and exactly how to help you overcome them. This is why he created Freedom Builderz, so that you can scale your business while protecting your time and your energy. Now, you guys know that delegation is a business superpower, and you can activate this superpower today by scheduling a complimentary call with Mike at freedombuilders with a Z on the end.com, so you can start building the freedom that allows you to take your business to the next level. Alex and I recently connected with Freedom Builderz for our Connect With Cannabis build-out, and we could not have been happier with the results. With Mike and his team, they were able to go through and outline and create a personalized program for our experience, develop our brand identity, build and design a custom branded web page, professionally edit our program video content, custom design all of our slide presentations, automate our email marketing sequences, create a seamless payment system for our offer, design unique infographics for our social media content, and guide us through our proven launch blueprint to generate organic leads through our social media. So if you're a coach, facilitator, or healer listening to this ad right now, and you are looking to put freedom back into your life, once again, go to freedombuilders with a Z on the end.com and book your complimentary call today. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the show, and I'm wishing you the best day ever. That's a big market. I know a lot of people that actually buy and sell those and make some really good money on them. It's interesting to see what's become a market now that cannabis is so much more destigmatized, still stigmatized, but it's less than it was. It's very interesting.
Yeah, totally. I was a pioneer in that market, and then bequeathed my collection to younger
still
friends
being used somewhere in the world right now.
Upon graduation, possibly in circulation to this day.
Yeah.
So like presently cannabis, these are approximations, right? Like what I'm about to say, I can approximate the feeling sense that it provides for me. But I, especially throughout the whole hotel development years, which I think taking on that project was kind of a reflection, I think, of just how my head worked. So I think even though I'm not developing that project anymore, I'm finding plenty of ways in my day-to-day life to have the same exact thought process about things. And there's a lot of aspects to the work. One time I might be doing more administrative type stuff, or one time I'm connecting with gardeners or even working in a garden, or one time, blah, blah, blah. And you got a lot of transitions between these things. And so if each one of those things was each one of those categories was a vertical floor in a building, it would feel rather tiresome to walk up and down the flights in between each step. But the cannabis sort of brings it all down onto one of those projector slides with they're all on the same level on a circle, and I could just spin between them rather effortlessly. That's the feeling I get. And so sometimes, I even said this yesterday, in the past, I've forgotten to eat if I've been consuming. And also my cannabis practice is very light. So it's I'll only utilize outdoor, usually biodynamic or certainly regeneratively as clean as possible, moon and sun grown cannabis. There are some exceptions to that, present company included, where I've seen cannabis grown in other ways where I've experienced it and said that, this is perfect in every way. I've really enjoyed it. But as a general rule, not the exception to that rule, that would be the kind of cannabis that I would source. And from that point, I would basically have a third organic tobacco leaf, a third mixed herbs and different flowers, non-cannabis or non-psychoactive in any way, and then a third the cannabis. And then I would vaporize it one path. So I'm getting a very small percentage of the hypothetical active ingredients in any of those things compared to smoking it, not to mention no particulate matter or carcinogens of any kind, because I'm burning it at a careful temperature in a totally clean chamber. That's my relationship with cannabis presently. And then hallucinogens, the difference between then and now is that when approached recreationally with no concept of even setting or any of the sort of sage guideposts to approaching these substances, all of which should be followed, and probably not for everyone even when followed. So
yes,
it's
agreed.
Individual thing. But I'm only speaking to my direct experience. So at that time, I don't know how much of a crapshoot, 50-50, 70-20, but there was a real randomness to what you would define as a good trip or a bad trip. And certainly the pop culture exposure to it was more slanted towards bad trip. And so even the concept of you could have a bad trip. How did I even get that concept? Well, that's what people were telling me about it. So that's what was available. Contrary to that, nowadays, I don't really even have the concept of a good trip or a bad trip. I don't have any negative connotation with the substances at all. I approach it, even if on my own, as though it was a guided shamanic experience. I've never really had it with more of a medical therapeutic kind of guide, but only really more of a spiritual kind of shamanic nature-based guide, or on my own, or with veteran journeymen and women.
Yes.
Basically, so again, pro-health. The only side effect for me has been good health. I like it occasionally at the sort of ceremonial dose, but much more often at what I would call a small dose, mildly perceptual. And then also as a microdose, just non-perceptual.
That's what I love about cannabis. I wanted to talk about this real quick. What I always say about cannabis is that I've found a way that, I know how many hits of what strain I need to take to get me just above my normal level of consciousness. And I think that's what you're talking about with psychedelics too, right? You're not trying to blast yourself with them necessarily, right? Not every time. Most of the time when I'm interacting with any psychedelic these days, it's to put me just beyond my normal consciousness, because at present day, I'm still integrating a lot of the big experiences I've had over the last 10 years. So, sometimes I'll get a little stuck. I'll be a little confused at what I'm doing, and, I'll have the space to do it, and I'll interact with a small amount of mushrooms. Cannabis, like I said, is my number one because it's just easy and accessible, and it does great for my particular physiology. But the ability to go just beyond your perception and go, oh shit, that one thing was resting right out here waiting for me to realize. Like, I don't need to send myself on a shamanic journey every time to get that. These days, I'm aware enough, because like you were talking about the mindfulness exercises and all the things that go along with quote unquote healthy way of interacting with medicines. I just need a little bit of a push in the right direction. And that's usually what I'm looking for these days. So it's interesting you bring that up.
I'm always looking for that, except, when I hang out with my friend and, he has his counter argument would be that, he agrees with that completely. But like when we're together, which is rare, so now it's already a sacred opportunity to do something together. And since we're together so infrequently, why not take a moment to do this, deeper experience? And if done, safely and et cetera, in the right circumstances, does provide obvious, benefits as well as challenges to overcome that the small and the microdose doesn't. So it's like, and then also it's like, especially if you're like trying to be convinced by your friend that it's time to do something like that, and you're saying like, no, I'm just not really, it's not what I'm called to. Like, why don't we have a small dose and like go do this or that? Then it kind of becomes the Joseph Campbell, like the cave you fear most is, where the treasure lies, sort of thing. So then it's pretty easy to, to be persuaded on this argument. But I always find myself on the small dose side of the argument by my nature. And then sometimes I challenge my nature because I've never challenged my instincts like that to do a larger dose of something in a ceremonial, setting, and approached it with respect and all the right sort of circumstances, and not had tremendous benefit. Usually 100%. What feels like life-changing benefit.
Absolutely.
And then like you're saying, each time for me that aperture opens, it has at least the potential to stay open. And it's not like recreationally too. When I used to do them, I feel like that aperture opened, but not having any of the life skills or practices to assimilate or make too much logical sense of some of those things. Like I probably had distorted fantasies and it probably was misunderstood and that aperture may be closed. But if approached sort of medicinally and ceremoniously, and then processed like through your own internal processing and meditations, I feel like you have the potential for that aperture to open, because it's a non-physical aperture. It's not like your eye has to open or close. It's a spiritual organ that's being described right now. And so that's kind of like where I thought this conversation could be cool to get into a little bit too, because we were talking about the ritual aspect and the initiative aspect of these larger doses. And it's like, what's happening there is discussed in biodynamics as well. And biodynamics in itself is basically like a modern day rite of passage initiation process, because what it's doing is the large dose of whatever the local entheogen is allowing you to have the ego death and go outside of your physical body and die, right? In a sense. And yet, of course, you didn't die. In fact, you're having a rich experience. And so now you've gone beyond death. You're on the other side, having this experience beyond death. And then you eventually come back into your regular waking experience, and you've taken back insights from the other side, upon which now you feel like there's actually a veil between you. Like you were able to see through the veil. Now you're back, you've taken insights and you're working with them in your regular day. And so Biodynamics and anthroposophy in general actually has like pretty specific instructions and meditations on such practices. And like when we go to sleep at night, which is the death of sorts, and like, so, or when you go into a coma and you're in a vegetative state, we, are leaving the physical body and we've entered into the realm where these plants generally have their consciousness exists.
The astral
That's why
realm.
they say
Yeah.
he's a vegetable.
Mm.
And so that's the level of consciousness that we're achieving there. And so it's like another veil has kind of been crossed. And so in biodynamic, like inspired by stuff from Steiner and then sort of interpreted and maybe expanded upon by this guy, Dennis Klosek, who we saw speak in a lecture, he advised on, for you it'd be cannabis, but for a diverse food farmer, it could be any crop and it could be rotating like over time, but you would dedicate yourself to a single topic. And you would think about the entire process of the cannabis plant growing right before sleep, from seed to its first little, green leaf, all the way through its whole process in your mind, imagining its ideal form and structure. And then you'd reverse that process backwards in time, back down into the seed and then into total silence. And you'd go to bed. You'd wake up, go about your day. Next night, same thing. You'd imagine it forward, backwards into silence, go to bed. And you keep doing this. And basically, eventually something, due to all the attention you're putting in this direction, something occurs to you that's not likely a form of communication that, no one's going to call you and be like, hey, I got the answer to that question you've been pondering. But essentially, you've asked a question into the plant community, specifically the non-physical, non-visible aspect of, in this case, the cannabis plant that you're focusing on. You're recognizing that when it is a seed, like you're looking at the seed and you can imagine that it grows into the full plant in your mind. And Steiner's example would be like, if you had another seed that was a plastic, artificially 3D printed version of it, that was just 100% replica, no amount of sun and, water would make it grow. So there is something invisible hiding inside the one that's not in the other. And all of a sudden you'll be going about your daily life and you'll have, something will catch your attention, like something new, something, you might even trip and like fall under something and like get clunked in the head by an apple. And then you look down at the apple and there's like a shape on it that reminds you of the other thing. And then you have a connection in your head. And so it's this like non-physical, non-visible world. It's basically a form of communication with something that's beyond the physical veil through meditation for the benefit of, deeper relationship with, in this case, cannabis, but and more generally, maybe the earth or a plant. That to me felt similar to the benefits of psychedelic. Like the benefits of doing that meditation felt similar to the benefits of psychedelic, which if you were to ask me, like, what is the benefit at the end of like any specific psychedelic experience? And even if I tried to journal on it and put it on words, like there really is no ever like word to it. It's approximations are fun, but it's a feeling sense inside. It's like just some sort of, again, non-physical, like, spiritual feeling that is also, again, like quite specifically harnessed and nurtured in biodynamics. Like the meditation is sort of like if you were to look at, if you're in the forest and you were to look at the sunlight coming through the green leaves and just block everything out, go completely silent inside and still, and just lose yourself in the green, like so much focus on the green that it disappears and you're just truly experiencing the feeling of looking at the green. You don't even see the green anymore. You would have this feeling of like regeneration and spring and growth and creativity, like this uprising feeling. Another example he gives, like if you were to just focus on things that were growing and budding and flowering and just empty yourself and feel that, and then just focus on things that are dying and decaying and withering and just feel that, like eventually a feeling arises which is similar to that of like when you're watching a sunrise versus when you're watching a sunset. And so like these very subtle spiritual things turn into be a form of communication with the world, which I think when you're on the mushrooms, you sort of have an ability to do that and potentially take back those insights, but also non-hallucinogenic simply by developing a form of communication that's non-related on your senses, but is an internal, what he would call your soul ears or your soul eyes. That practice is just, a mindfulness practice, more or less, a meditation practice.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are all enjoying the show. I wanted to stop by and fill you in on our brand new, completely free to join Facebook community called the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle. I imagine many of you are aware of our newest creation within Highly Optimized, which is the Connect With Cannabis Certification Program. Alex and I are having so much fun empowering coaches with the skill set of coaching with cannabis and helping them up-level their coaching practice that we wanted to create a place where anyone could join to ask questions, receive free information on how to work with cannabis in the way we teach in the program, and be able to gain clarity around how to get the best results with their clients in order to become financially independent in their coaching practice. To join, hop over to the link in our Instagram bio and send us a request. It is our intention to assist as many coaches, facilitators, and healers as possible in the important work they are doing in the world. And if you are looking to join a community of like-minded individuals just like you who are passionate about helping their clients achieve the highest quality of life possible, the Highly Optimized Ceremony Circle is for you. I am looking forward to speaking with all of you in the group, and as always, enjoy the show. It's fantastic, man. This brought up so much for me. The first thing being that a book that I read a long time ago, Plant Spirit Medicine, they talk about connecting with plants in the exact same way. Yeah. When essentially before you go to bed, you'll go to your plant, you'll give it an offering, tobacco, sage, whatever. And then you'll ask for that plant's guidance in your dreams. And the first night I did it, no shit. All I remember, I didn't do it enough to get quantifiable long-term results. But the first night I did it, I had a dream of like a Jack and the Giant beanstalk, but the beanstalk was a cannabis plant. I remember climbing up it for what seemed like hours, trying to get to the top of it and couldn't find it. And the other interesting thing is you bring up biodynamics and something that I'm curious if you know about. So I've been in the mystery school now for about 6 months. And that brings up the whole aspect of visual meditation that you were talking about too. But I'll get into that in a second. But they created an awareness for me that there are two groups. I think they're the same company or same organization, but they practice biodynamic farming, Rudolf Steiner's method, right? And then from there, what they do is they add in fairy magic. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard, I'm sure for anyone listening who doesn't understand, that fairies are elemental beings, they're like, what the fuck is that? But I'll break it down a little bit. So, not to get into a super deep rabbit hole, but there are these other beings called elemental beings. And if you look at the mystery school creation story, essentially, the whole Adam and Eve story, those were Elohims, right? Versions of God, a God, who got together and our cloud of intelligence decided we wanted to be like that Elohim. So if we wanted to be like a god, then we had to distinguish between good and evil. We had to have a soul. We had to have emotions. We had to distinguish, and that's our mission. Well, there are other life forms that have been here whose mission was not to distinguish between good and evil. And so one of the terms they use for these is elemental beings. So this includes, it's going to sound ridiculous to anyone who doesn't understand this, but it includes dragons, fairies, dwarves, elves. It's funny how we're taught to think those things aren't real, but yet they're all over the place in mythology. Lord of the Rings is super popular. Why is everyone so excited about it, right? There's almost something in our DNA, is what I felt, that tells us something is there. And so when they told me about this, now they didn't, obviously I don't talk a lot about cannabis stuff there. Immediately I raised my hand and I was like, where are these people and where can I find them? Because anything that involves, quote unquote woo-woo like that, I'm 100% in on. I will try anything. And so it's very interesting because fairies, apparently they control nature. So we were really mean to them essentially in the past, and that's why they don't really show themselves to us. But if you're attuned and you have your third eye open, you're eating a healthy diet, etc., especially on psychedelics, you can start to come into contact with some of these things, but it doesn't take psychedelics. And one of the things that is the last thing I wanted to mention too is what you are beautifully stating with everything you just said is one of the concepts that I tell people is almost like my point of doing psychedelics, because psychedelics show you possibility. They show you what could be possible. But if you have that experience and you go back to your daily life and you don't integrate anything, it's just going to be basically a dream that you were part of. And at the same time, if you do choose to integrate and say, okay, I saw in that vision that I was really overwhelmed. I'm going to take some time like you did to read a book and not put so much pressure on myself. Then you actually have life become a psychedelic. And that's where I really feel the magic of these medicines are, is to remind us that life itself is a psychedelic. No psychedelics needed. It's just that so many of us are so busy that we've forgotten the joy and beauty of looking at trees, of zoning out, of tuning in, all of these things. I think that's one of the biggest things that you brought up there that I think is like, quote unquote, one of the points of psychedelics.
Yeah. Also, the thing that it brings you in direct connection with, which is sort of where that Steiner concept I was discussing is the idea of reverence. So like the feeling of reverence, which comes from these psychedelics for sure. Like you can just look at a blade of grass and be like gushing with the creation of mystery of creation. But like that can be cultivated without the substance too in day-to-day life. And so that's been the most enjoyable meditation practice of late and he has the most beautiful way of describing it, which is like the feeling of reaching towards the door handle of like a venerated guru's or spiritual person's office for the very first time. You're about to like open the door, the feeling that you would have right then. Cultivating that out at a tree or wherever you're sitting. I mean, at your daughter, at your partner, wherever you're sitting. And that's a real rocket ship there.
100%, man. And, it brought something up for me too, which was the entire idea of psychedelics, and why I think they're becoming so popular now is because back in the day, right? Like there's a two-part thing here. Number one, a lot of people don't understand what life is, quote unquote, supposed to be about, or what it could be about, put it that way. And I'm not saying that I have necessarily the answer for that, but I feel I've found my own answer. And I think the idea is for each of us to find our own meaning of life, right? And at the same time, that takes some availability, right? It takes some space in your life. And these days, especially in Western cultures, I can speak from my own personal experience. And someone told me about meditation. Like, yeah, it's going to calm you down. It's going to make you feel less anxious, might make some of your pain go away. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll try it out. But I wasn't that dedicated. The first time I had a real guided shamanic journey and I experienced like what meditation can bring you to, I was like, oh, now I get it. Now I'm invested. Now I know I want to do this. So I think for a lot of people, their lives are so busy, especially in like Western, the Western world, any big city atmosphere. We're so convoluted with stuff to do that we don't even know what's possible on the other realm. And a lot of times we don't have the time to go meditate for 20 years and be a monk, right? So we want to kind of capture the essence of what life is meant to be, and then find a way in our busy lives to be able to schedule off time to do what it is that's going to help us remember that, like meditation, like breath work, like working with the land, like doing what you love, all of these things. And I think that's one of the most powerful aspects that psychedelics can do is, like you were saying, they're a rocket ship. I always say this, like, you don't need a rocket ship to get somewhere. It is faster. It can be faster. It can also help you explode on impact, depending on how you use it. But, I think the general idea is that so many of us right now are starting to wake up to so many things, especially after the pandemic and all that craziness. I think a lot of people are looking for a quick ROI in terms of like, okay, I'm hearing all the spiritual stuff. I see all these people doing this stuff. Seems like they're really into it. I don't know if I really believe in it, but let me have an experience rather than learn it from a book. Let me have an experience. I think that's what positive, conscious, intentional plant medicine use can give. The double-edged sword of that, though, is that we both know, and everyone listening knows, that most of the plant medicine use going on, I would say right now, is not exactly conscious or intentional, even if people might think it is. Because if you're going to do ayahuasca 20 times a year, you probably are not integrating. You're probably not actually conscious with it. Because to the degree that you think you need another big experience and you haven't yet to integrate the other one is the degree to which you are setting yourself up to externalize your power onto these plants. Because these plants don't want to be looked at as God, right? They're like, hey, we want to remind you of some things that are important to you, but we don't want to be worshipped. And I think a lot of people are starting to worship them as the thing. Oh, I need that thing again to feel that way. And it's like, no, that's the wrong thing. That's the same thing as going to a doctor to get, healthcare, right? It's like you are your own best doctor. There are times and places, but you want to internalize your power as much as possible. And so I see that double-edged sword happening for sure.
I think that's probably the benefit of my recreational history with it. My recreational history was like too much, and bad times. And so it's like, then I approached and then I didn't do it for like 10 years. And then when I learned how to do it in a different way, I always approach it with caution and a little bit of nerve, fears and stuff. But like, I view that as an opportunity, like you said, to surrender to those things and to take that stuff off the map after the journey, and be more fearless in every day.
People will come to me and they're like, I have someone who could guide me on a mushroom journey, but I'm a little scared. What do I do? And I'm like, you're perfect. Like the people that scare me, I say this often. If I'm in a group of, say, 5 people and we're about to experience a psychedelic medicine, and 4 of them are like, I don't know, I'm a little nervous, right? They're not terrified, but they're like, I'm a little nervous. And then one guy's like, this is going to be nothing. I'm not worried about it at all. That's the dude I'm worried about, because that's the person who's going to have their world rocked, and they're going to end up having an ordeal rather than an experience. The other people, they might have some challenging times, and then the facilitator, they'll be okay admitting like, hey, I'm going through something challenging, because they already accepted that might happen. But the person who doesn't even see it on their radar, that's the dangerous person, because that's the person that can have a full-blown psychotic episode. And so I always tell people, if you're a little bit scared and fearful, that's normal. That means you're actually like conscious of what could potentially happen here. It's the people that go into it egotistically that I'm like, yikes, get me away from you.
Yeah, you just brought up something that, like, for people who, if it's possible that people are listening to your show because they don't take psychedelics and they're looking to learn more, then I'm not totally attracted to the idea of a group setting.
Same.
So like, I like it individually if I could do it safely, ideally with a buddy system, and maybe most ideally with a guide. And like, that guide, if the guide is on medicine, maybe it would be on a low dose. And then maybe if we're on a really strong dose, maybe there's someone on no dose who's also in the premises, safe, safe distance away, totally on vibe with what's going on. Like, if not, I don't know. Like, that's for me. That's what I consider for me to feel safe. But I don't necessarily love the idea of whether it's a retreat or a group setting, even like, close friends and associates, which, being in Austin, I have a feeling that it's probably going to come up. And
oh, dude, it will.
Yeah, I'll probably find the way that feels good for me to experiment with that, assuming that it's just an edge of mine that needs to be challenged anyways, right? But I haven't been attracted to it in the past, and as a new person, if I could achieve all those same elements of safety and whatever that you get from a setting like that, but do it sort of private with an experienced person or guide, some people might prefer that. I know I would.
Absolutely. And you bring up a great point too, man, which is the whole idea that entities are real. Negative entities like life force suckers, all of these things are real. And I won't get into it. It's a super deep rabbit hole, but for anyone listening, just look up some stuff from Chek on Are You Possessed? He has a great 9-hour workshop on Are You Possessed? But the idea is like, he's spoken plenty of times about how people that are very famous, that I imagine everyone listening to this podcast would know, they've gotten themselves in some trouble because they go to these group ceremonies with people they don't necessarily know, and they don't know what these people's lifestyles are like. They don't know what, they're doing for health and all of these things. For me, I only interact with psychedelics with other people when I really intimately know them. And I know that like they're aware of what's going on in their world. They're working on things, potentially even have a very strong spiritual practice like the Mystery School, where they're doing invocations and they're creating sacred space daily and they're cleansing themselves with sage and those kind of things. Because, I know it can sound woo-woo, probably not to anyone on this podcast, but that stuff is real, right? There's a reason why shamans do what they do, right? Essentially, they're holding space. And what that really means is like, they're interacting with different energies in the room and feeling if there's something trying to get someone. And so, having done psychedelics at music festivals a lot, I can tell you that, it's not that I will say you shouldn't or should or whatever. I just mean to give awareness to these things, that there are a lot of dark entities that hang around people and they love to level up. So for all you listening who are like the pinnacle of health, yeah, you're number one on the list to any entity. So that's like the only bad side about being healthy, is that you're going to get preyed upon pretty fast, and it's definitely interesting and very worthy of knowing.
I mean, like, even if you have never taken psychedelics and you wanted to understand that in a non-woo-woo way, like, you could imagine having your experience severely impacted by other people's psychological state in the group, even in a superficial way, like they're having major outbursts or, just weeping uncontrollably. And, certainly this is inspiring, just like if for people who do take psychedelics, you'll know if you're on a playlist and like it's just grooving and grooving and you're loving it. And then all of a sudden you find yourself just fucking like ripping into the demons of hell. And then you realize, oh my God, it's the song. And then you change the song and the whole world changes all of a sudden. It's like zippity-doo-dah, zippity-day. It's just like on a heartbeat. So just imagine there are people like having experiences around you. So it's also like less, maybe it's a more veteran move to like engage in a group setting like that. And then it also made me think like, if I am in a group setting like that, I would like, whether or not I could wrap my head around entities and whatnot, like I would like there to be an experienced guide leading the group who I felt really good with. Not a stranger, because just imagine being in a weird psychological state and then the stranger is supposed to be your guide and you're terrified of the person. So like I've really only done it with people that I feel extremely safe with in a regular day-to-day life. And I know we're probably out of time, but the last thing that this is called This One Time on Psychedelics. So it's like, even though we talked about everything but this, it did make me think like about like funny war stories or whatever.
Please lay it on me.
I didn't really have one. I have one that's more relevant to this conversation of like people who are interested in interesting benefits of psychedelics. Like I had this dog for 14 years, Moses, best dog ever. Rest in peace, Mosey.
Yes.
And I got his picture right here, actually.
Wow.
And he, probably to other people, it would have been like, wow, look at that old dog. Like how old's that dog? Like it's, but for me, he seemed completely fine. I was like, wow, this is the best 6 months. Like, because for the year and a half prior, for almost 2 years, he was having what's called night day switching, which is exactly as it sounds. He was just up crying and wailing all night. And we had a 1-year-old baby at the time. So between the two of them, I didn't sleep for like 2 years. I slept on the couch trying to get the dog not to cry so the baby could sleep. It was a nightmare. And basically I took some shrooms by myself. Okay, there is one funny war story of this day. Is that my wife was going to take for the first time mushrooms. And we had some that were about a year old in the house, and I wanted to like test the potency, let's say. And so the wife and daughter were out of the house for the day, and I took a 3-gram dose to myself. Pretty solid dose.
Yeah.
I prefer 1 often. So 3 was strong for me.
Yeah.
And I was thinking they were less potent due to the age. Turns out pretty similarly to their original potency, and it was a pretty solid 3 grams. But I took them knowing that at one moment of the day, my daughter's babysitter, was going to open the front door, grab her jacket off the steps, which I had left for her, and walk out the door, but knew that I was taking a day of rest and didn't want to be disturbed. And so as the mushrooms start picking up, for about 3.5 hours of it, like every 15 seconds, I would practice like, hi, like trying to say something like hey, Anne, like
hey,
that's
everything's fine here.
Yeah, like just practicing normal stuff.
Yeah.
Turns out I was probably like on the floor rolling around when she came in. I didn't even see her, but that was only a funny tangent. What actually happened during this is that my dog fell down a flight of steps during the journey. And when he got to the bottom of the steps and I looked at him, I saw basically a skeleton. I can only explain it that he was already dead. I mean, he was upstanding, and I just was able to see that he was completely dead, for lack of a better word. And I brought him into me, and we lied down, and I said, "It's all right, bud. Like, we're both dead. Like, we're already dead. Like, I see that you died. Like, I get it. It's like, but right now on these mushrooms, like, I also am dead.
Yeah.
And like here we are." And the next morning I put him down, and we had been going to doctor's office for a couple weeks, getting like, this guy didn't know what was going on. So then went to get a blood test from this place that they had to get sent to Michigan to get examined. I put the dog down in the house. A woman came and we did it in the house. We set up this amazing altar with like tennis balls everywhere. We made him a cake out of turkey and like sardines, and had pictures of his favorite friends next to him, and I played his favorite song. Like, it was a really generous,
Oh, it's beautiful
ceremony. And I was just like obviously weeping. And after like 30 minutes of weeping, I carried the dog outside and put her in the lady's car. She drove off. I come inside. I'm like still crying, trying to compose myself. The lady's probably at the end of my driveway. Like, she just left. And the hospital calls and they're like, "Hey, we're calling with the results for Moses." I'm like, I'm like, we don't need the results. Like, he's dead, you know. And like the doctor picks up and talks to me for a second. He lets me know that he had like some insane like thyroid cancer, and he must have been in a huge amount of pain. The doctor said he couldn't believe how brave, like how little pain the dog was acting based on how much pain he should be in. And that it was totally the right thing to do to put him down. And obviously I didn't know any of that. And it made me feel great for not knowing that that's why he was crying for 2 years, that this tumor was growing in his neck and he was so uncomfortable. But the mushrooms somehow, likely because of what we were speaking of earlier, is that I had sort of crossed the veil. I just saw that it was time. And I couldn't have seen that at all for up to 2 years prior. And it may have been time all the way along. It's hard, at some point in that time. It was time sooner than I recognized.
Yeah, man. That's what I love hearing. These are the experiences that for me like really mean something, because I know for me, when my dad got sick, I was living in the house with him, and it went from like, oh, he's diagnosed with cancer and he's totally himself, but he's got brain cancer. And so it very quickly went to like, oh, he doesn't remember who I am. Oh, he's very like angry at, my mother and I and things like that. And during that time, he would have, like it was kind of a strange time. Like, there would be times where like he totally was himself. And then like those times started to get less and less over the year and a half he had it, which was an insane amount of time he lasted. I actually fed him RSO, Rick Simpson oil, and he was only supposed to last about 6 months. And he ended up lasting a year and a half. And it was only the last really 6 months that were really, challenging. But during that time, I did quite a few big mushroom ceremonies, like 3 to 5 grams each. And by the time he actually passed, I mean, I remember it was a very strange thing. I mean, it was late at night. I'm a night owl. My mom yelled at me and said, "Hey, I think your dad's dead." And so I came downstairs and he was dead in his chair. And like, we just sat there and waited for, I forget the name of, when someone knows, like, it's kind of like hospice. When they know someone's dying, they don't bring an ambulance. It's kind of like they already knew it was happening. But I remember sitting there and feeling very calm. And it was really weird because I was having all these thoughts of like, you should be more sad. You should be this. You should be that. I was shooting all over myself. But yet I really feel I processed a lot of the emotion with mushrooms, because when I was doing them, I was like laying down and feeling everything. I wasn't like going on adventures and doing stuff. Like, I was really there just feeling like the weight of it. And also I remember I had one experience in particular where I was just encased in golden light. And I remember my grandmother being there. And I remember like so many of my relatives being there. And I remember I came out and I told my mom that I said, "Hey, wherever dad's going, I just went there and it's fucking awesome. So like, we can be sad for us because we're not going to have him, but don't be sad for him because he's going somewhere fucking great." And I really like that experience changed my life. It changed how I look at death. It changed everything for me. And so, yeah, that is the potential, especially with those we love, our pets, our fellow humans, everything, to remember that we are infinite, that everything is going to be okay in the end. And that actually the most pain is just us in the physical form not having them. They're actually, just having an absolute blast when they leave. At least that's what I've experienced. And so, yeah, it's really beautiful, man. I'm really glad you shared that story. Hell yeah. And dude,
my pleasure.
Yeah, dude, that was a fine closing point. And my last, two last questions. One, where can people find you to learn more about Be Here Farm and everything you guys are doing now, moving forward in Austin, Texas?
Yeah, so like I said, we have the farm in California still. So our employee Raphael is holding down the fort and giving love to the farm. And so we'll fully kind of transition to Austin sometime over the next year or two as we sort ourselves and get our heads on straight. But the best way to get in touch is email or Instagram. Email, they're both easy. love@beherefarm.com or Instagram @beherefarm.
Beautiful, man. And the last question I have for you is this. If someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what is the one piece of advice that Jared Pickard would relay to them to allow them to have the smoothest experience possible?
I would just let them know I'm not a doctor.
Dude, I think that is the best one I've ever gotten in the show.
I think of that phrase all the time because at the end of like whatever show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine or something on TV back in the day, the guy goes, "Not a doctor." And so whenever I'm talking about things that are from my direct experience, I would actually hate to think that anyone was swayed to ever try anything that I just spoke about from my own experience. But I mean, I think I kind of spoke to the nuances of safety and precautions and, you know, even legality, and there's risks and danger around that depending on where you're trying these substances. So yeah, I wouldn't have recommendation for anyone else.
Beautiful, man. That's spoken like a true warrior or a true wizard, rather, because it is so true. I mean, you know, I ask a lot of people that question and people give great answers. And one of the reasons I do is because most people answer like, use your own discernment, right? And that's like been the cool thread that I've noticed is that in my whole journey of psychedelics, like the people that tell me you need to do this, I always get a little nervous of, right? So it's funny how when I started the show and I started asking that question, most people were like, I don't know what would be best for you, but use discernment and do your own research, you know? And I think that is the best advice ever. Like, I'm not a doctor. Take this and run with it. Do what you want. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's up to you because this is not meant for everyone. You don't need this to get these insights, you know?
That's the great thing about it. Not only is it not for everyone, so no pressure, but it's completely available for those who are interested to learn more about it.
Yes, I love it, man. Okay, guys, did I tell you that this episode was going to be extra special or what? Jared and I hit it off immediately when we first met due to our mutual love and affinity for regenerative agriculture, organic, lab-grown cannabis, and the amount of potential within the realm of psychedelics as a whole. Throughout my time getting to know him and trying his products, I can truly say that Jared's approach to life is one of a kind, and that his radiating positive energy is infectious to anyone who is lucky enough to find themselves around him. And my hope is that each of you who listen to this episode have the opportunity to pick up on the positivity radiating from this episode and channel it into creating a life that is so magical that the only way to explain it will be stating that your life as a whole has become psychedelic in nature. Jared, thank you once again for taking the time to dive into these beautiful aspects of your journey with me, for being a positive force in my life and the lives of countless others, and for always being down to blow bags of herbal goodness with me at any place and any time. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.